Welcome back to Zero to Hero, the series where we teach you how to teach yourself how to play Pokemon VGC. We're back with the How to Actually Play series, and today we're going over the Tailroom archetype. Tailroom is a unique archetype and one of the least common ones. As the name suggests, it has both Tailwind and Trick Room on the team. But more than just having access to both of these moves and trying to slap the two archetypes together, the archetype actually builds around both of them perfectly. The team includes at least one Tailwind setter, one Trick Room setter, and at least one Tailwind sweeper and one Trick Room sweeper, but usually two of each of the sweepers, and usually one or two other support Pokemon. It tends to use Tailwind against slower opponents, and Trick Room against faster opponents, while sometimes even utilizing both of them in the same game. As we do in this series, we will look further at the goal of this archetype by looking at specific team examples, and how to actually make plays that achieve the goal of the team with specific tactics. So let's take a look at how all these roles are filled with our first example. Just before we get into it, make sure to subscribe and like the video. This first team comes from Reg G and was the winning team from San Antonio 2025, piloted by Justin Tang. The team has Calyrex Ice Rider, Landorus Incarnate, Amoonguss, Urshifu Rapid Strike, Roaring Moon, and Ogerpon Hearthflame. It seems very interesting, as there aren't any super fast threats on the team that always want to have Tailwind, and there's just one very slow threat in Ice Rider that wants Trick Room. But the details are what matter here. Let's take a look at the EVs on these Pokemon. None of the faster threats in Landorus, Urshifu, and Roaring Moon have max speed or max attack investment, but they have a very balanced EV spread, leaning quite heavily into bulk compared to their normal spreads. Likewise, the slower threat in Ice Rider has significant speed investment, something it almost never runs otherwise. This gives these Pokemon very middling speed tiers overall, that allow them to outspeed opposing threats with Tailwind, but are still slow enough to be able to underspeed many of those faster threats with Trick Room. These middling speed Pokemon like Urshifu and Landorus are still relatively fast, in the sense that they're faster than slow Pokemon, and they're fast enough to outspeed some of the fastest Pokemon in the format, like Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow Rider, with Tailwind, but they're more than slow enough to outspeed those threats with Trick Room. And they're also able to underspeed the mirror match, since they have less speed investment than their typical spreads. This Hearthflame is also very unique, running nearly maximum physical bulk, allowing it to function in Trick Room against faster threats and be a very bulky redirection support. Our next example is Archaludon, Pelipper, Sinistcha, Ursaluna, Goldengo, and Dragonite, a relatively common team we see in Regulation H. This team has a Rain core and a Trick Room core, but again with these EV spreads it also functions as a Tailroom team. Tailwind on Dragonite and Pelipper, as well as a Choice Scarf on Goldengo, give this team a solid fast Tailwind mode, while Trick Room on Sinistcha and the slow Pokemon Ursaluna enable the Trick Room aspect of the team. Archaludon as well has very low speed investment, less than many other Archaludon, while you may have noticed Ursaluna has quite a bit of speed investment, more than most other Ursaluna. This allows Archaludon to underspeed fast opponents with Trick Room, and it allows the faster Ursaluna to outspeed slower threats with Tailwind. Both of these threats can make use of both Tailwind and Trick Room on this team, while still allowing them to have significant bulk and damage output. That is one of the main points of Tailroom teams, is that these Pokemon can function both in Tailwind and in Trick Room, based on the matchup. These teams often juggle using both speed control options in the same match to great effect, and can make team selection difficult for your opponent. So what specific tactics are used to make this archetype function to its fullest potential? Today we have 3 tactics that Tailroom teams like to use. The first one is the Tailroom trade. When leading into a game, Tailroom teams will either lead with Tailwind or Trick Room, try to utilize all turns of that form of speed control, and then on the last turn before it expires, have the opposite type of speed control set on the last turn, allowing you to benefit from the other form of speed control as it ends. For example, if you were to lead with Tailwind in a faster offensive Pokemon, deal lots of damage while your Tailwind is up, and on the last turn of Tailwind, where your opponent could be more likely to protect, hoping to stall it out, you've already switched in your Trick Room setter, allowing you to set Trick Room on that last turn of Tailwind as it expires. So right when Tailwind expires, now you have Trick Room active, with hopefully your middling speed offensive threat that is now slower than your opponent's Pokemon, allowing it to move first in Trick Room. Our second tactic is the halfway speed switch. Sometimes your opponent may still have Tailwind on their team, and if you had led Tailwind, once the Tailwinds are matched, your opponent's Pokemon are probably faster since it's built for Tailwind rather than Tailroom. So you might lead Tailwind, set it with your middling speed Pokemon to make them faster. Then once your opponent realizes that they can simply match your Tailwind to regain the speed advantage, you can position your Trick Room setter on the field, and by the time that they set their Tailwind, you can be ready to set Trick Room, because once they've matched Tailwinds, you'll be slower, so Trick Room will give you an advantage. Our third tactic is less of a specific tactic, but more of a way for you to use these very odd EV spreads to your advantage. Many players will assume Pokemon like Landorus, Urshifu, and Ogerpon Hearthflame are built very offensive and will have little if any defensive investment. But when you know what your Pokemon will be able to survive with these bulky EV spreads and your opponent doesn't, that can give you a huge advantage when they think they would be able to take it out in one hit. And only after laying some attacks into these Pokemon and seeing how they are able to take more than is normally expected, will your opponent realize that they're on the back foot. What about the team's bad matchups? Similar to Balance, this type of team has a wide variety of tools, and there aren't many strictly bad matchups for it. However, choosing the wrong Pokemon into specific matchups can be very detrimental. Hyper Offense and Hard Trick Room can both give trouble. Since Hyper Offense will always outspeed you, setting Trick Room against it is essential. Depending on your EV spreads, however, your faster than normal Trick Room threats might have less bulk compared to Hard Trick Room threats, and they might not have enough to survive a Hyper Offense double up. So the Pokemon you have that are naturally faster, but you've trained to be significantly bulkier, again like that Hearthflame for example, might have the edge in allowing you to set Trick Room, because your opponent might not put enough resources that they need to pick up the KO, assuming that less resources will pick up the KO. So your opponent might assume that it will only take one attack to pick up the KO on these Pokemon, but since you've trained them to be so bulky, it actually takes 2 attacks. And having that one turn where your Pokemon is kept alive, due to your opponent not realizing that they're so bulky, will enable you to get your speed control off. Pokemon like Sinistra and Ogerpon, for example, are essential. Using Redirection, and possibly even your Terra early to secure a Trick Room goes up, might be just what you need to get the advantage. And once Trick Room is up against Hyper Offense, you will have the advantage. Against Hard Trick Room where their threats are slower than yours, you can play the role of denying Trick Room, similar to you playing Hyper Offense into their Trick Room. Leading 2 offensive threats can sometimes be enough to KO their setter. And once you're able to remove it, you can simply have the speed advantage by having faster Pokemon than their Trick Room threats. If they do end up securing Trick Room, you will likely still have some Pokemon on your team that can move before at least some of their Pokemon. Even if they do secure Trick Room, it likely won't be as one-sided in their favor as it normally is when they're playing against fast teams. However, if they do have the speed advantage while Trick Room is up, you can sometimes use one of your offensive threats to exert enough pressure, forcing your opponent to remove that, while you have your Trick Room setter on the field, ready to use Trick Room itself to reverse the opponent's Trick Room, putting the speed back into your favor. Thanks for tuning in to How to Actually Play Tailroom. I'd like to say a thanks to all the patrons for supporting the channel, and thank you for watching.